Welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales, sponsored by Membrane. This season, we're diving deep into the 3 T's of developing scalable sales organizations: talent, transformation, and technology. We're bringing together sales leaders from around the world to help you elevate your organizations and crush B2B revenue goals. So smash that like button, subscribe, and ensure you don't miss an episode. Hey now, welcome. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I appreciate it. Today, we're thrilled to have a conversation with Roderick Jefferson. Roderick is a seasoned expert in sales enablement, and he's author of the best-selling book, Sales Enablement 3.0. This is really about the third T in the 3 T's season. It's about technology. So with over 25 years of experience leading transformative programs at some of the most successful B2B SaaS tech companies, Roderick brings a wealth of knowledge on how to integrate strategies, processes, and tech to optimize the customer lifecycle. So let's get started and learn something from Roderick. Roderick Jefferson, welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales. How are you?
Hey, Paul. Thanks for inviting me, man. I am great. How are things on your side?
Couldn't be better if I tried. I'm having an absolutely wonderful day. I got my kids downstairs. They are all getting themselves lunch. They're old enough to do that, which is great. I can be upstairs on a podcast doing this. And I'm just happy as a pig in its muck. What about yourself?
I'm good, man. It's been a fantastic week. Things are going well. I am happy, alive, and nobody in the family has monkeypox. So that's a good week.
I generally call that very good week. No monkeypox.
Large low, but hey.
I'm a happy
standards.
Exactly. Well, I have to ask you too, there was recently, and did you ever think that, Roderick Jefferson, did you ever think that there would be a World Sales Enablement Day?
I did not. And I could not be happier to see it happen finally. I've been in this industry, for 18, 20 years now. And to see it come to fruition says a couple of things. One, that it's growing up. We still got a long way to go, I'll be honest, but it's growing up. And secondly, I think the value of enablement is starting to grow outside of just sales enablement. Now we've got full blown go to market enablement. And so beyond just the folks in our space are saying good things about it. That's a plus.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And one of the things I want to ask you about is let's define that. Let's define sales enablement and that term, because it's changed. I've been in this industry a long time. It's changed a whole lot over the years from different terminology. But how do you define it?
Well, I think there's a couple of ways to go about this. And I talk more about revenue enablement and go to market enablement than sales, because I think the sales piece is a bit myopic. So I'll go from a revenue perspective. I look at revenue enablement as integrating strategies, processes, and technologies to optimize the entire customer lifecycle, from lead gen all the way to post-sales expansion and retention. I think it's also about aligning all the lines of business inside of an organization and becoming that hub that spokes out to every other part of the organization. And the final piece is tying it back to revenue impacting metrics and measurements. And I say impacting because we don't drive revenue as standard sales folks, as I used to do when I was a sales leader, right? We impact and we influence it. So we have to find a way to communicate, collaborate, and then orchestrate across the entire organization.
And so let's dive into each of those things. And I'd love to talk about some of the things you're doing in GTM enablement across the board, right? And revenue enablement. Mm-hmm. But you broke it down there into 3 areas. You had 2 sets of 3 areas. The first was let's talk about the technology. I talk about it as technology, talent, and how we really provide them with the tools to execute, right? Mm-hmm. But dive into those areas a little bit more and how today's enablement teams are really driving and striving to help drive that revenue in those areas.
No, absolutely. First of all, great question. I think it always starts with the buyer's journey. because there are too many companies that are focused on their sales process, sales stages, sales methodology. Let's call it selling motions. And then they try and shoehorn their prospects into the way that they sell versus how they buy. I want to flip it on its ear and start with revenue acceleration, right? And that means up-leveling talent to focus on deeper level of discovery and qualification, right? To show helping versus selling. Because to me, selling is I'm going to win. Helping says I need to understand how I can help you be more consistent, bigger, faster, and stronger, right? It also means having and requires a deeper level of business acumen at multiple levels now, where you used to be able to talk just a little bit about a lot of things. Now it's literally about asking more questions than you're giving answers to, because there's so much information out there right now, Paul, and we both know, I don't think sales folks are really informing the way we used to. Now it's more about validation and showing your key differentiation, competitive advantage, and business value more. And then it's also helping and focusing on lowering sales leadership attrition and sellers attrition. And I'm not talking about just AEs, BDRs, AEs, solution consultants, CSMs, customer support, all that. That's one side. The next side, now let's look at the back end of the house. And that's how do we increase ACV and higher renewal rates? Focused on more consistent onboarding. Well, handoff first, if I step back from sales into CS, which now has become kind of this black box of mysticism, right? And darkness. How do we now create a handoff that becomes a better integration and implementation for the customer? How do we now focus more on deal velocity at the top of the funnel, not just on the sales side, but for the CSMs also? Because more and more, they're being asked to drive upsell, cross sells, and renewals, where at one time they used to be just kind of the renewal base. The next is the focus on sales plays that start from the BDR all the way through the process into CS as well. And then what that generally leads is to a higher rate of upsell, cross-sell opportunities and renewals. But more importantly, a higher level of customer satisfaction. All too many times I've seen where, and I've been as an enablement leader, I become their best friend 90 days before renewal. Nobody wants that, right? The next piece is consistent messaging and positioning. Now going from that communication into the collaboration piece. And that means making sure that we've got alignment across all of those pieces: sales, marketing, operations, your partner ecosystem, as well as your post sales, right? So that means more role specific messaging tied to your ICP, your ideal client profile. That means creating scalable and repeatable selling motions, tools, and processes that are consistently used across that entire buyer's journey. And you do that, and it leads again to more increased customer satisfaction and a higher level of retention. The last piece, the orchestration. That means building stronger partnerships across the lines of business internally, because most of the time I've realized when I was in-house and also now as a fractional enablement consultant, the biggest problem tends to be culturally, where there's a mismanaged or a lack of communication based upon silos that have been built. So now it's about building more of a cohesive, consistent, scalable focus back to that buyer's journey, which then means also focusing on increased communication across the lines of business and sharing. So enablement has to be, I'll call us the translators of dialects and languages. We've got to speak all those other languages to those other lines of business and translate that back into sales, and then translate from sales into their speak and their language as well. And when you do that, the biggest piece that I've seen missing is the focus on execution and adoption by leadership and management, because we can give them the best thing in the world. But if they don't own the adoption, the execution, but most importantly, the positive modeling of that, we know what happens. It dies on the vine. But other than that, I know nothing about enablement.
Well, I say it relatively simple. It's how do I get people the right information, the right place, at the right time, and the right tools to execute on it. And I know it's much more complex than that. And you just gave a great explanation of that. Tell me a little bit about enablement and how you actually execute, how you recommend enablement individuals execute with the salespeople themselves and with sales teams. So you say there needs to be buy-in from the leadership, but how do you support them? Because a lot of times you get this, especially in larger organizations, right? Mm-hmm. You start to hear rumblings of, and it used to be sales ops didn't get me this, or it used to be IT didn't get me use, or it used to be I didn't get trained on this, right? Mm-hmm. And what I've seen come together is those areas, those levels of communication really all fall now to this sales enablement piece.
Absolutely.
So how do you start to drive that collaboration and cooperation with salespeople instead of being the sales enablement team that says, oh, just enter it in the CRM, or, oh, you'll just find it in the CRM, or, oh, it's just there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm a big guy on threes. So there are three things: listen, learn, then lead, right? And the listen starts from going in and saying, look, I've got credibility. I know the secret handshake. I was a salesperson, but a long time ago. But that doesn't mean I don't get it. I want to understand how it works today. So that means I want to sit in on calls with you. I don't mean just the recorded piece. I want to literally be an integrated part of listening. I'm not here to extend your sales cycle. Don't worry. I'm not going to throw any curveballs, but I do need to hear what's being said real time by real prospects and customers, because going back to that translator of dialects and languages, now I can go back to product marketing and say, you know what? Hey, I've heard this 10 times and we love the messaging and positioning. But when we get to like slide 8, it always gets fuzzy. Can we either smooth that out or take it out? Because that's where things start to derail. I can go back to product management and go, you know what? I've heard the same request 8 times. How do we move that up on the release cycle to get it out? I go back to the sales leaders and say, you know what? I've been sitting on calls, and what I'm finding out is Disco and Qual were pretty good. We suck at handling objections. Why don't we put together an objection workshop so that we can get these folks to get some real life examples and practice here, slip and fall here, so that when they get out, then they move forward. I also go back to sales leaders and say to marketing and sales together and say, what if we could run an accreditation, a stand and deliver, not a certification, but literally a stand and deliver on our messaging and positioning, on the new product that we're releasing, on what's happening in the competitive landscape. That way we get consistency in the way that we're answering these questions. And also we get a chance to practice so that when they go out to the real world, they've already gone through it and it becomes muscle memory, no different than an athlete, right? I go back to HR and I say, I understand, and I bring sales and HR together and say, we've got the ICP down. What we don't have is our IEP, which is our ideal employee profile. The kind of folks that we used to hire moving into the next level doesn't work anymore. And then I come back with metrics and measurements, and I talk to the sales folks and say, here's what you asked for. Here's what you got. Tell me what you need next. Here's what you got. But that does not mean that enablement is the fixers of broken things and broken people, because we're not. And we're not sales scribes. We're not sales support, and we're not a sales doormat. What we are is a partner across the entire organization. And that starts from the top down, from the CEO, from the board. Enablement has to be integrated and woven into the fabric of a company's culture. Otherwise, it dies.
So, and I can understand why you're talking about why this path has moved from sales enablement to revenue and GTM enablement. Let's talk a little bit about that journey, if you don't mind, because when I started in sales, and it's probably similar time as you, right? I'm not going to estimate, but I started in sales in 2003, and it was...
I started a little earlier.
Okay. Well, I started in sales in 2003, and it was... We had a rudimentary... Well, no, actually it was 2002. Rudimentary CRM. It was home built. that we were able to log into. And then HR was responsible for training. So we had to always go to IT to, I had to go to IT to figure out, what was going on with the CRM. Then we had to go to HR to figure out what was going on with training. And then we would go to, if I wanted a presentation, we did have we had an admin, a sales admin that would do, presentations and that type of stuff. And I noticed that there has been this growth and change and combination of these roles together as people understand their importance. Like when I say it's gone from that, our sales admin to we had sales operations, right? I was director of sales operations in a company. That was a big deal. And then we've just moved forward and forward. Talk through that journey a little bit, because what is the critical importance of this role now, and why is it so important?
It's important because the way we used to do things no longer works, and in most cases, it doesn't even exist anymore, right? Because of the way that people and companies are buying. Because, as I said earlier, the enormous amount of information that's out there, we're not really selling, we're validating in most cases, right? So now what we really need to focus on is key differentiation, competitive advantage, and business value. Now, sellers are very good at those first two. The problem is, newsflash, prospect or customer only cares about the last one, business value, right? And which also ties into ROI and all those other pieces. And I define that as, so Mr. and Mrs. Customer, by having a relationship tied together with me and my company, and you can only get from us, how can we help you either increase productivity and efficiency or decrease pain? Because for the longest time, we were always taught, go dig for pain, accentuate pain, highlight pain, manufacture pain. What if it's not about pain? What if it's about increasing productivity and efficiency or scalability or repeatability? So that means more focus on discovery and qualification and asking more questions. But I think that's only half of it though, Paul. And that's where things get left out. The other half that a lot of sellers leave out, except for your absolute rock stars, they know how to do this. And that is, they ask a simple question. So I've found out about your company. I understand what your goals are. I've listened into your quarterly call. I've looked at your 10K, 10Q, all the things that we do. But what I wasn't able to find anywhere on the internet, what's in it for you personally? Can I help you get your name in lights? Help with a promotion? Sometimes it's helping getting you out of the doghouse. Because no matter what we sell and what AI does for us, which I think is amazing, it still gives us content. It doesn't give us context yet. The context comes from talking person to person and finding out what's a win in this for them. We all were taught, especially more seasoned sellers, we were always taught, go create, find where your champion is. They don't just mysteriously poof, appear out of thin air and smoke. It's because you take time to get to know them. I'm not talking about the old times where we go out for cocktails and happy hour and blah, blah, blah. And, ooh, there's a fish behind you. You must fish. I used to fish, or we went to the same school, right? Now it's, how can I help you find a win out of this? And in turn, they will align to becoming your champion. And in some case, your mentor and your mouthpiece.
So enablement, you are really focusing on helping a salesperson transform and be able to ask those questions. Let me pivot a little bit.
Sure.
Pivot a bit to systems and one of my favorite topics, which is data. Like I was able to differentiate myself early on in sales because I paid attention to the data I was collecting and those type of things. How does enablement help drive system effectiveness or as well as an understanding of the data that's out there around their customer? And it's not just all, hey, I'm going to give you a tool like Apollo or those type of things.
Yeah,
I'm talking about how do you truly drive understanding and help people gain understanding about what's out there and how best to use it.
I'm going to go back to my threes again. The first is, I think it starts with what I call demystifying the dark matter, right? Which actually sounds pretty cool.
Listen to that. Did you just coin that?
A long time ago.
You said that before, haven't you?
In a blog way back.
You said that before. Yeah.
Right.
That rolled off too quick.
Well, it literally comes down to how do you align all of your technology resources? Because as sales, there are a bazillion of them. I've actually narrowed them down to kind of 6 categories, and it's knowing these and knowing how to use them and knowing how to get the best out of them. And then I'll talk to you about kind of the metrics on the back end, right? It starts with, you've got to have that learning and content management system, right? Then there's the prospecting and sales reporting. Then you've got the marketing automation pieces because you've got to have all that in a single place. Then there's a plethora of communication tools. Then you've got your sales enablement platforms. And then, of course, you've got to find a way to be able to get into deeper with your revenue intelligence tools. But it's not enough to just have those because, as you know, they can create more problems than not having them if you don't use them properly and you don't pull any key information out, right? So that's where now you start talking about and having those conversations around revenue focused metrics. Because from a guy coming like yourself that's coming from running sales revenue ops, you know that talking to a sales leader versus an SE leader versus a partner leader, you better be able to have a different conversation because something matters different to each of them, right? And I think there are 2 types of metrics. One that enablement impacts and influences. And then there's another set that we own and we report on. So if I'm talking to a BDR leader or an SDR leader, what am I talking about? I'm talking about outbound activities that are going to lead to increased conversion SKOs. And then how do you narrow it down? It's the daily, the weekly, and the monthly goals, meetings, SQLs, outreaches, touches, all that, right? I'm talking to a sales leader. That matters, but it doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is average deal size, deal velocity, new pipeline, quota attainment, time to revenue, win and loss rates, product mix, things of that sort. That's what we impact and influence. What we own the accreditations, the needs analysis, the surveys, the usage stats that come out of those tools that I was talking about earlier, the outbound communication of streamlining that and making sure you don't get overburdened. Net, how do we make sure that what we're doing is helping sales folks to actually get out there and sell more instead of being mired in what we hate the most, which is admin. But what if I'm talking to an SE or an SE leader and they're going to look at me like I've got 3 heads if I talk about those other things? They care about number of demos per deal, number of opties won and lost, number of POCs, length of POCs. Okay, let me flip my hat. I just sat down with customer success. Do they care about any of that? No, not really. They care about adoption rates, customer churn rates, customer lifetime value, CSAT, escalation resolutions, first contact of red accounts, net promoter score, renewal rates, those things. So what it comes down to is the old adage, Paul, that we've all learned, and that is know your audience and speak their language. The thing that bugs me the most about enablement, and I'm part of the community, too long, we've been trying to get everybody else to speak enablement ease. No, stop it. Go learn what matters to them and speak to them in their language, and you will now instantly become a partner. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. One of the things I found when you start to do that, and I truly appreciate that approach too, is that you start to get these realizations that you can start to bring together. And one of the things that I'm a huge fan of, and I don't know if you are, but I'm actually a fan of technology of less rather than more in terms of how we operate and execute. We've had this, and I'm a technology provider. By the way, most of those things that you mentioned, Roderick, membrane is helpful when we play different. So
100%.
But one of the critical areas there, right, is how we then dive in and we can speak language across everything, and we can talk to how we tailor platforms and optimize platforms instead of bolt on and integrate and tie things together. I mean, because we've had this mass influx. I was looking at the stats lately. We've had a mass influx of technology over the past 10 years, but it has not driven rises in quotas, right? Or not in quota attainment. It is not driven
absolutely.
attainment. It is not driven a rise in
It's still hovering around 30%.
Yeah, it's even it's less now, but it's not driven. The optimization that we want in most companies, and I think it's because most companies play the "I'm going to bolt everything in" game.
I hate that.
Instead of optimizing, taking the talent, the training, and then optimizing the technology to what actually helps them sell. So, what's your opinion on that? Because I've watched this from the outside, and it's bugged me.
I've watched it from the inside, and it bugs me too, Paul. First of all, everything is not for everybody. Just because I'm talking directly to my enablement folks now, just because your peers or the folks in your tribe are using it, doesn't mean it's going to work at your place. Because what it really comes down to is, where is the maturation point in that cycle for your company? You may be at a different point, so you don't need those. Secondly, it comes down to the types of buyers that you're working with. You may not need all those tools. And thirdly, nobody needs everything. So figure out what works for your space, for your prospects and customers, not because they said, well, your competition does this. Good for them, right? There's still less than 30% of quota attainment too. And so sit down with your leaders and find out, what does in-state success look like for your sellers? And then let's reverse engineer and figure out, are we just overwhelming them with tech for the sake of doing it? Or if we streamlined, could we be more proficient, more effective, and more successful?
That strategy is so critical. And then having a place for sales enablement at the table in that strategy is wonderful. Because if you don't have it, right? If you don't have that strategic definition of the sales plan, a revenue plan, go-to-market plan without enablement at the table, then you find the very interesting state, which I'm sure you've been a part of. I know I have, which is hey, this is our strategy. Go make it happen.
Yeah.
Or this is our strategy, and I saw this ad here, and that's going to make it happen. So go implement it for me.
Yeah.
Or, hey, this is our strategy, and we need to tie these 6 systems together because we have data on all these systems. And that's going to happen. So go do that instead of having that seat at the table and optimizing the strategy. So
absolutely.
How have you moved up, and where do you sit now in those strategy sessions, and where should sales enablement sit in those strategy
enablement
sessions?
Should be at the big table for that very reason. And you just nailed it. We're strategists. And when you give us the opportunity to really share and show that, it actually makes your life easier as a leader, because we are talking to each other incessantly. We know what's out there. And sometimes we find out what's cool, what's sexy, but also vaporware. Right. And honestly, we don't have a dog in the fight. We're just here to make everybody bigger, faster, and stronger. And our focus is always, and when someone comes, a leader says, hey, I've got this call from someone and they want you to check out and do a demo and listen. And I go, 2 questions. For our prospects and customers, is this going to help them increase productivity and efficiency or decrease pain? Well, this is what it does. No. Which of those buckets does it fall in? Because it's not going to be both. It's going to be one or the other. And if you can't tell me where it is, I'm not taking the demo. It's as simple as that. But then I have to tell you why. And my why is always back to the buyer. And so as long as we are on a level playing field, and our North Star is always helping our prospects and or our customers increase productivity and efficiency or decrease pain, we're always in a win-win situation.
So I have a couple more questions before we wrap up. And one of these, I have to mention AI, because you have to mention AI on an enablement podcast, right? And a podcast about sales. But do we know the impact that AI will have in the next 1, 2, 3 years? I guess I don't think anybody has a crystal ball on this.
No, I don't.
What's your opinion? What's your opinion on how this impacts the enablement and sales jobs? And because I have a very specific opinion, but I'm interested.
I think there's a couple of things, and the first is, I think that if you tell me you know where it's going to be in 1, 2, 3 years, you're lying to yourself because I'm not going to believe you. But what I can say is by trends and by what I see that's happening right now that's being implemented and what's working out there inside of my enablement tribe, it's kind of 6 ways I think we're leaning towards being able to leverage AI to increase both efficiency and productivity. The first is top of funnel. It's streamlining lead scoring. Next would be automating those mundane tasks so that we can literally get people out there building those relationships with prospects and closing more deals. The next would be real-time analytics. And that's giving them the right analytics and insights into their sales activities, which would help them then to identify areas where they can improve their performance and make data-driven decisions. Get I think and I feel out of your vocabulary 100%. The next is for our leaders, personalized sales coaching. Hopefully getting away from this is the way we've always done it, getting away from this is what worked for me, and getting away from trying to make mini me's, if you will, as sales leaders. The next would be that efficient sales process. That means creating proposals, contracts, just sales docs that are going to allow our sellers to, again, spend more time selling by automating and streamlining their processes, reducing their time and effort required to close deals because we're now only focused on the things that are moving in, AKA helping them to qual out faster. Mm-hmm. And then finally, it's automating customer communications, chat box, virtual assistants, things of that sort that'll handle those basic routine customer inquiries. And again, freeing up now the CSM so that they can focus on those things that are more complex and more strategic tasks that helps to build customers for life, if you will, and higher retention.
I had an interesting conversation with somebody the other day, and they told me, well, if within 8 months to a year, your company is still using an SDR instead of AI, you're going to be well behind.
I'd go a step further. You're part of a chase to the bottom, and it's scary to say. I think the traditional BDR, SDR role will be gone in a year. That doesn't mean that BDRs will go away. I think what will happen is they'll be repurposed and or we'll go back to, and everything goes full circle, right? Remember when we had full cycle AEs, right? Yeah. Everything that's old is new and everything new is just something old from way back that we're using a different tool now, right? But the thing that scares me about it is, and I started as a BDR, so I got a lot of love for BDRs, right?
I did too.
I feel their pain because I was out there dialing for dollars just like them. The thing that scares me is we used to use the BDR role as a stepping stone and to cut your teeth to step into sales. Mm-hmm. Where does that go now for the kids that are coming out of college? Because there are some people that major in sales now, which when I was in school was not a real thing. But for the most part, most of us in sales did not major in sales, did not think we were going into sales. You kind of fall into sales, right? Mm-hmm. And if that's the case and we don't have that stepping stone role, what happens to the younger, dare I say, diversity of thought that you get from those younger kids that are moving in? Now what we get is a bunch of seasoned folks, and it'll be very easy to turn this into an echo chamber.
Yeah, I actually very much agree with that. I'm not sure the BDR role is going to shift. I don't know. Like, I don't know the tech well enough to know if it's going to be, actually making phone calls for me, right?
Yeah. No.
That's what the gentleman I was talking to said. But I agree with you completely. What I've noticed is there's starting to become a realization that we need to invest more in top people, invest more in top talent, and train them really, really good because they have to bring value now.
Quickly.
Like they have to bring value as quick as possible.
That long ramp doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, but like in that BDR stepping stone, because it no longer exists, right? So I that is a problem that's going to need to be solved, is how do we take individuals, get them in and allow them not to be a parrot,
Yep.
not to just use AI, not to just follow the system, but how do we enable them to really truly shine themselves bright and drive value for people in an organization? And I think that's going to be a huge challenge, because I think that's what most top companies have to do. They have to do it.
Well, I think it also starts with how we enable BDRs differently, right? You're talking about someone that's coming out of college and university, or first, maybe second job, right? Realistically, more like second these days. But let's say it's your first. You've been in school for 4, maybe 6 years, depending upon undergrad, MBA, et cetera, right? You've had a cohort that you grew up with year over year. You've had a syllabi that gave you a roadmap. You go into corporate where it's already foreign territory to you, and we expect you to hit the ground running and take off. One of my mentors, Tom Mendoza, over at NetApp, used to always tell me, if you're a new BDR, we expect you to have an open mind to learn and a curiosity to go and ask questions. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, because it's going to happen. That's where you learn those things, right?
Yep.
So minus that opens up a whole other can of worms. Where are we going to send these kids now? How are they going to learn what I absolutely love, which is the profession of selling, of sales, not selling.
Yep.
The other piece is teaching these kids, and even our senior folks, how to help instead of sell. Right.
Yep.
And part of that is calling out immediately.
Yeah, I define, it seems like we define sales very similar. I say it as leadership, service, and wayfinding, right? It's how we help people achieve a vision they want to achieve. How do we help serve them by, getting a need, or helping them fill a need, even if they don't know they need it. And how do we find a way to do it together?
It's helping, not selling, right? It's conversations, not presentations.
Exactly. I think well, I'm really happy to hear you say that, because it's in enablement, right? This is not the world of learn how to give a presentation. It's not that world. It's not the world of learn how to fill out a CRM. It's not that world. It's not the world of learning, okay, let's take, I'm just going to give you a shitload of technology and have you, use it. It's not that world.
No.
And nor do we want it to be. I think
because
it's so much beyond that.
That's why I always say you train animals, you enable people.
Yeah.
I'm not teaching you to roll over. I'm not teaching you just how to use a tool. I'm literally time over time preparing you to have more high value conversations.
Awesome. Roderick, you published a book recently. Can you do me a favor? Can you do me a favor and tell us the book title and where to find it? Because I think after this, people are going to want to read it.
The book is called Sales Enablement 3.0, the blueprint to sales enablement excellence. And you can find it everywhere that you get your books. I've got it in hard copy, in ebook, in audiobook, and it has now been, and I'm incredibly blessed to say, it has been named a bestseller on Amazon. And if you have any questions, once you get it, I'd love to get feedback. I'm always open, because I'm actually working on a second edition of it right now. And I'm taking my lead from folks that have read the book to say, this is great, but here's what I wish I would have had. Also, the book is 3 years old. Things have grown, i.e. AI. There's a whole boatload of stuff that needs to be added in there. And plus, I want to make sure that my baby is, as beautiful as it can be out there. And that means taking my lead from folks out there outside of outside of my tribe, should I say.
Well, and you just told me prior to this podcast that your sultry tones are reading the book too on the audiobook, right? So I get to hear those. I get to hear that part.
See, we were good to go.
That deep baritone, that you're throwing at me. I get to hear that for the whole book.
Yeah. So anybody that needs something at night to get to sleep faster, it's my voice.
No, man, I'm very. I can't wait to listen. I'm not going to read, readings out of my vocabulary.
I'm with you too. I'm an audio guy personally.
Yeah. Love the audios. And thank you for that. How do people find you if they want to pick your brain or work with Roderick Jefferson?
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate that. I always say, if you can't find me on social media, you're not really looking, because I'm all over the place. On LinkedIn at Roderick Jefferson, on Instagram, Roderick_J_Associates. You can find me at my website, roderickjefferson.com, or Roderick Jefferson on YouTube. To make it easy, I've got a linked tree, Paul, that I'll give you, and hopefully you can throw it into the show notes, and it's much easier to find me.
Well, thank you so much, and fantastic. Any final words? Final words is the wrong way to say that. Anything you want to leave? Anything you want to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, I would leave with, and it's kind of an aside to what we've talked about, and that is, while all of these things are important, my 5 Ps are the processes, programs, platforms, policies. The most important that we often get left out is people. Let's remember, this is literally about people. And for enablement, we're in this because we're people. Let us be your partner and let us help you here. We're not here to serve you. We're here to partner with you.
All right. Well, on those words, thank you so much, Roderick. We will close it up. Everybody, make sure on all of the different platforms that this is published to like it, share it. And if you can high five it, give it a high five as well. That would be amazing. But and get out there and absolutely keep shining bright. Please make sure you're reaching out to Roderick, and we will sign off today from the Art and Science of Complex Sales. Have an absolutely blessed day. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Art and Science of Complex Sales. Please take a moment, like, subscribe, share this podcast on all your favorite platforms, and let's get the word out. This podcast is proud to be brought to you by Membrane.com. We are the world's top B2B sales platform. And in the world of B2B sales, with everything from prospecting to business acquisition to managing complex growth, Membrane has the right size technology for your sales team. Our latest innovation, the Coaching Cockpit, empowers your leaders, managers, and team with the information and tools they need to take their skills to the next level and to take advantage of the exponential power of effective sales coaching. With our technology and the top team of sales partners around the world, Membrane is helping to achieve our driving vision. This is, quite simply, elevating the sales profession. To learn more, find us at www.membrane.com. That is membrain.com, or contact us via email at sales@membrane.com. Keep shining bright and have a wonderful day.